You know what's funny about getting older? You stop counting the things you won. Uh, you start counting the people who were there when you won them. People ask me about 16 world championships. They ask me about the robes, the limousines, the arenas. Um, and honestly, that's never the first thing that comes to my mind anymore. What comes first are faces, voices. Men who stood in corners, drove through the night, bled on the same canvas. These are the five names that come to me before any championship belt ever does. When I first started running with Tully, I thought I had him figured out. Dressed sharp, talked smooth, looked like the kind of man who calculated every risk before he took a single step. At first, I didn't know what to make of him. I thought maybe he was too polished, too careful. I was wrong about every part of that. What people never saw from the outside was the weight Tully carried inside the Four Horsemen. He was the one everybody assumed was riding my coattails. The one critic said was only there because of the association. That noise followed him for years. And he never addressed it. Never once. He just showed up and did what needed to be done. What Tully had that nobody else in that locker room had, not in the same way, was the ability to act before the moment asked him to. He didn't wait for a signal. He didn't calculate. He moved. That quality was not something you could coach into a man. You either had it or you didn't. Tully had it completely. I remember a night at Greensboro Coliseum, 1987, when things had turned wrong in that ring, and I was taking more than I should have been. Cold night. Crowd was split. Before anyone in that corner had said a word, Tully was already moving. No discussion, no hesitation. He was there because that's where he decided he needed to be. That changed the air in every building we walked into together. The other side knew it, our side felt it. When Tully was in the room understood that things were going to go a certain way. When I think about Tully Blanchard today, I think about fearlessness. When I first got around Arn, there was nothing about him that demanded your attention. No flash, no entrance that stopped a room. He didn't dress to be noticed, didn't talk to fill silence. The first few weeks, I remember thinking, this man is quiet in a way that makes you underestimate him. That was a mistake a lot of people made. I caught myself before it cost me anything. What the cameras never picked up was a specific kind of labor Arn absorbed so that the rest of us didn't have to. His whole career, people called him the enforcer, the protector, the man beside Ric Flair. Said it like it was a lesser thing, like his entire identity was defined by someone else's name. That's a burden most men would have let hollow them out. Arn carried it like it weighed nothing. What made Arn irreplaceable to me, specifically to me, not just to the team, was that I never had to explain anything to him, not once. I could look across a locker room and he already knew what the situation was. That kind of understanding is not built overnight. It is built by two people paying close attention to each other over years without ever making a production of it. I remember a road trip from Charlotte to Raleigh, 1985 late winter. Car broke down somewhere on Route 85 inches to dark, no lights on either side of the road. Arn got out, worked under that hood for 20 minutes without a flashlight, got it running, got back in, and didn't say a word about it for the rest of the night. That was who he was. When I think about Arn Anderson today, I think about dependability. Now here is where it gets complicated, because Dusty Rhodes was my opponent more times than almost anybody. The crowd loved him and couldn't stand me, and that was exactly how it was supposed to work. When I first understood what Dusty was doing inside that ring and on that microphone, I thought I was watching someone who just had natural instinct. Big man with big emotion. I almost dismissed the intelligence underneath it. That was the thing about Dusty that people consistently got wrong. They saw the charisma and thought it was personality. It wasn't personality, it was work. Relentless, deliberate, specific work. The pressure that put on me, on everyone who stepped into a program with him, was something the audience never fully understood. He made you rise or he exposed you. There was no middle ground. What Dusty did for me specifically was refuse to let me get comfortable. The moment I walked into a building where Dusty was working, the standard in that room went up without a single announcement. It was involuntary. Everyone felt it, and everyone responded to it. I responded to it. I remember Starcade, 1985, Charlotte. Before we went out, Dusty found me backstage, and he said, quietly, not for anyone else, tonight you're going to earn it. Not a threat, not a challenge, a statement. I walked out there, and for the first time in a long time, I understood what that phrase actually meant from the inside. That building gave us everything that night because Dusty demanded everything. When I think about Dusty Rhodes today, I think about standards. When I came up against Harley early in my career, I read him as a threat and nothing more. Older, harder. A man who looked at you like he was deciding how much of this he was willing to tolerate. He didn't extend warmth easily. He didn't invite conversation. First few interactions, I kept my distance. I thought he was a man protecting his position. I was reading the surface. What I didn't understand then was that Harley Race had paid for every bit of that toughness in a currency the rest of us hadn't been billed for yet. The years on the road, the injuries worked through because there was no other choice. The nights in territories where nobody was watching and he still performed like the building was full. He'd earned the right to be exactly what he was, and he didn't owe anyone a softer version of it. What Harley gave me, and I didn't want it at the time, was the understanding that there is no such thing as a meaningless night. He treated every single match like it was being evaluated by someone who had never seen him before and would never see him again. That standard didn't waver. Not in Kansas City, not in Tulsa, not in a gymnasium in front of 200 people. I remember hearing afterward, Kansas City, 1983, that Harley had cracked 2 ribs before the match. Nobody in that building knew he worked 45 minutes. After the fact, the people who were there still talked about it as one of the cleanest performances they'd seen. When I think about Harley Race today, I think about discipline. And the last person I truly loved the most was Roddy Piper. People always got us wrong. They saw us on opposite sides of this business for so many years, and they decided they understood the relationship completely. They saw the promos, the intensity, the way we occupied the same space like 2 live wires that had no business being near each other. They wrote a story about rivalry and competition and 2 men who couldn't stand the sight of one another. That story was not false. It was just profoundly incomplete. They was actually happening between Roddy and me was something that resists a clean label. Brotherhood gets you close. It doesn't get you all the way there. When I first started getting into rooms with Roddy, the energy was genuinely unpredictable. Not in a dangerous way, in the way of a man who operated from somewhere so deep inside himself that you couldn't always track the direction he was moving. He was funny and then suddenly serious. Warm and then completely unreachable. I didn't know if I liked him for a long time. I know now that was because I didn't yet understand what I was actually looking at. What the cameras never captured, what the crowds never had access to, was the specific nature of Roddy's sacrifice. Not just the physical cost, though that cost was staggering and real and written permanently on his body by the time we were both old enough to feel it. What I mean is something deeper than that. The sacrifice of self, the way this business asks a certain kind of man to pour himself in so completely that the boundary between the character and the person underneath stops being navigable. That is not a metaphor. That happened to Roddy. I watched it happen over years, and I didn't always have the language for what I was seeing. He became Roddy Piper so thoroughly, so without reservation, that the man who existed before that character, the kid from Saskatoon who came up with nothing and decided to bet everything, that man became harder and harder to locate. Some people in this business make peace with that. They find a way to hold something back, keep a room in the house that belongs only to them. Roddy didn't do that. I don't think he knew how. I don't think he wanted to learn. I remember a night in Los Angeles, 1984, after a show at the Sports Arena. We ended up sitting in a parking lot until 3 a.m. just talking, not about wrestling, not about the business or the politics or who was getting pushed and who wasn't, about everything else, his kids, his father, the parts of himself he left in cities he couldn't remember the names of anymore. And somewhere in that conversation, I realized that Roddy understood with full clarity, not innocently, exactly what this life was extracting from him. He could see it. He had named it. And he was going to give it anyway, not because he had no choice, because he had made a choice consciously and completely, and he was not going to spend one moment resenting it. That is not a small thing. Most men, when they finally see the price clearly, renegotiate. Roddy paid in full and closed the book. He passed in July of 2015. I was in a hotel room when I found out, and I sat there for a long time without moving. There are things I never said to him that I should have said while the mornings were still there to say them in. I think about that more than I probably should. I think about that parking lot in Los Angeles and the fact that I had a chance that night to tell him what he meant, not to the business, not to the audience, but to me specifically, and I talked around it instead. We both did. That's what men do. We talk around the things that matter, and we assume there will be another conversation. There wasn't. When I think about Roddy Piper today, I think about sacrifice. I think about a man who didn't just give his body to this business. He gave himself the whole of it, without conditions, without an exit clause, and I don't think he ever got it back. I don't think he wanted to. But I wish just once I had told him that I saw it, that I knew what it cost, that it mattered to me in ways I was never good enough with words to say out loud, and I spent my whole career being paid to talk. The older I get, the more I understand what time actually removes. It takes the headlines first, then the arguments who should have held the belt longer, who drew the bigger house, who had the better run. All of that dissolves. The robes are in storage somewhere. The arenas have been renovated or torn down. The championships are behind glass in buildings I don't visit anymore. What stays is something smaller and more specific. Arn getting out of a car in the dark without being asked. Tully already moving before the situation required it. Dusty standing backstage with 4 words that meant more than any promo I ever cut. Harley working through pain in a building half the country had never heard of. Roddy in a parking lot at 3 a.m, choosing this life with both eyes open. That's what's left. That's what was always real. Tully brought fearlessness, the kind that doesn't wait to be asked. Arn brought dependability, the kind that never announced itself. Dusty brought standard, the relentless, uncomfortable, necessary kind. Harley brought discipline, the kind forged in rooms where no one was watching. And Roddy brought sacrifice, the full and irreversible kind that leaves a mark on everyone who was close enough to see it. What made that era, those years, that locker room? It was not the talent. Every era has talent. What we had was men who trusted each other in ways that were never going to appear on a television broadcast or a pay-per-view poster. Real trust is invisible. It only shows up in the moments when everything is going wrong and someone is already there. I wake up some mornings and before I think about anything else, before 16 world championships, before any of it, these 5 men are already in the room. Championships fade. These 5 men are still with me every single morning. If you had to walk back into that locker room one more time, who are the people you'd want standing beside you?